All right, well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. We've heard a lot about the science and the whales, and I'm going to speak a little bit about what we do at the Southeast Regional Office, which is manage the human dimension. And so in my job, we've heard a lot in the media about Rice's whales. There's been a lot of interest lately. And in our work, I'm part of a team of many, by the way, who implement the MMPA and the ESA in the Southeast region. And the two questions I've been hearing the most is, why bother saving these whales? There are hardly any left. They're not going to survive. And why aren't you? And then the second question I get is, why aren't you doing more to save these whales? There's only 50 left. And so when I think of the first question, sort of, why bother? There are only 50 whales left. We heard this morning how vital these whales are for the climate, for the ecosystem, and that's certainly the case here. They're really important to the economy. They contribute to the environment, which contributes to fishery production in the Gulf of Mexico and so on. Rice's whales in the Gulf of Mexico also matter because they are part of one of the most diverse ecosystems, ocean basins rather, in the world. We are still discovering species in the Gulf of Mexico. This is just an example where a deep end consortium studying mesopelagic fish in the Gulf of Mexico have discovered 12 new species in the past 10 years. So we're still discovering species in the Gulf of Mexico, and we just discovered a new whale. And so it's just a place of incredible diversity. But perhaps the most important reason for why bother is this. Extinction is permanent. It's been 300 years since a whale went extinct, the Atlantic gray whale. And if Rice's whales are gone, the Gulf of Mexico would lose one of its largest and rarest animals due to human impacts and due to human impacts from us in the US. And we know that rebounding from near extinction is possible. So it's not too late by any stretch of the imagination for us to bring them back from the brink. When I think about the second question, why aren't we doing more? There are only 50 left. The short answer is there is indeed a lot we are doing, and clearly much more needs to be done. It's complicated and it takes time. To be clear, this does not mean that there's no sense of urgency. To the contrary, there's tremendous urgency. But we have little margin for error with the species, and that also means that it's critical to get it right out of the starting gate. We can't waste any time. So navigating towards recovery requires knowing and understanding the whales, which we've heard a lot about today, and there's still a lot more we need to know. The many interacting threats that we've heard about, and how those threats affect those animals, what we can do about those threats, and then bringing people and expertise together around solutions. But I'm going to come back to this in a minute. These two questions, why bother? There are only 50. Why aren't you doing more? There are only 50. These two questions imply that we should either do nothing or do everything. And in fact, I think what this does is it sets up sort of this paradigm that is sort of paralyzing to us. It creates a situation that leads us to inaction, paralysis. It delays us in implementing solutions, which will all increase the risk of extinction. So I'd argue that this sort of opposing paradigms is in and of itself a major threat to these whales. So, indeed, I think all of the all or nothing question isn't going to get us further. I think the nuanced question that we really need to be asking is, how do we change the trajectory of Rice's whales towards recovery in a diverse and industrialized Gulf amidst a changing climate, all while considering the collective needs of industry, the whales, humans, and the ecosystem? And more simply stated, how can we recover these whales in a way that isn't either or? So this is a really difficult question, and we're fortunate that the Endangered Species Act, which we've been here celebrating, provides opportunities to address these nuances and complexities through collaboration, finding common ground, and solutions. The Gulf of Mexico is really unique in its juxtaposition of this enormous biodiversity and simultaneous industrialization. Both of these things are significant to the US economy. And so how we go about recovering, and it's the only place in the world where Rice's whales live. So how we go about recovering rhesus whales is going to be equally unique. It's going to take time, and it's going to take answering these really hard questions. It's going to take all of us working together to prevent extinction. This isn't easy. It's not fast. It's hard work, but it can be done. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so NOAA has a history of working with the ESA and implementing it, and we have had successes, as have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so we know we can do this. We've had these successes through these collaborations, and when there is more of that opposing views, it slows things down. So we know we can do this. We have the tools in the ESA, and the ESA provides, if you look at it that way, those great tools for collaborations. So, stepping back for a second, large whales are long-lived animals. Their lifespans match or exceed ours. Indeed, we know from important scientific research and records from individuals from some species that large whales can live more than 100 years and some perhaps even more than 200. So extra time is needed to save such a long-lived animal, since there are whales alive today that were born decades before the ESA or the MMPA was passed. When I was in first grade, many years ago, humpback whales were endangered, listed as endangered, and they were still facing threats to their survival, particularly from whaling and other things. By the time I started college, all populations of humpback whales were decimated to about 95%. The year I graduated college, there was a moratorium on whaling, and things started to turn around. And reducing the threat of hunting and ensuring these whales had safe spaces to thrive, et cetera, has resulted in humpback whale recovery for some populations along the Atlantic coast, particularly where I live. I won't say how long it's been, but that first grader would be pleased to know that the majority, though not all, of humpbacks are recovering well, and this was not by sheer luck. The recovery is an example of what can happen when state, federal agencies, diverse stakeholders domestically and internationally work together to recover a species. Oops, sorry. Okay. All right, so changing the trajectory is hard. Changing the trajectory takes relentless focus and decades of work, but it can be done. And we, NOAA, and our U.S. Fish and Wildlife colleagues have the expertise, as I said earlier. And so, for rhesus whales, we are at the very beginning of this recovery process. You could think of it that we are in the emergency room, as we said earlier, in triaging. We are drawing on our experience within NOAA and our other federal agencies to do everything we can within our limited resources, it's important, to build successful strategies towards recovery. So what are some things we're actually doing for recovery? First of all, we heard a lot of the science that was done today. There have been about 12 reports and publications that have come out in the past years. We are using marine spatial planning, as Lance mentioned, to minimize overlap of rhesus whales with other ocean uses, such as aquaculture and wind energy. We are finalizing critical habitat designation and consulting with federal agencies on their proposed actions to assess and address risk to right whales. An example of that, to Anne's question earlier too, is that we have to have Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, where we consult on these federal actions, and there's an oil and gas biological opinion that basically is in place right now, which is in that rhesus whale area. From what we know about what we heard today about rhesus whales, there's a requirement for 10 knots or less in the area, avoiding nighttime, utilizing AIS for vessels bigger than 65 feet, and also keeping 500-yard distance from the whales. And that is for the oil and gas industry activities within the rhesus whale area. It's just an example of some of the things that can be done with a tool of the ESA and what we know about the whales. We're drafting a recovery plan and conducting further studies to inform risks associated with vessel strikes and ocean noise, and making sure that there's a stranding network that's viable to respond, because that, as we saw how vital that was for the holotype here, and to learn as much as we can and collect these important data that inform all sorts of things, as we've heard. And so making sure that we have a network that's ready and able to respond. We're engaging with stakeholders on non-regulatory approaches to address threats in many different ways, including partnering, outreach, and education. And we're taking a page out of the North Atlantic right whale playbook that's been really successful, where we're starting to bring together and work with others, bringing us to the table as well, to develop a sort of consortium for rhesus whales that will bring together scientists, academics, NGOs, and so on, to form a collaboration for science, leverage opportunities, share information about this species, and that's being planned for the spring of 2024. All these strategies together, these research and conservation actions, are essential for recovering rhesus whales whales in a manner that is effective, informed by science, and balances the needs of the species and our stakeholders. We know that working collaboratively gets us towards our best ideas and our best outcomes. We know this. And this is where we are putting all of our energy in the Southeast region. In addition to what we're doing now, we have a strong vision of outcomes we'd like to see, recognizing, of course, there's limitations of funds, but we have a vision, we have a path forward, we have ideas of where to go, such as better scientific understanding to inform a lot of these decisions, coordination and collaboration among stakeholders, partnerships, reducing human impacts, and public awareness. The public awareness is a real key component to all of this, getting the public involved and aware. The other question I get a lot of that's usually rhetorical is, I had no idea there were whales in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're at that starting point to try to bring along the public in the Gulf to join us in rhesus whale recovery. So this is my son. When he was in first grade, we took him whale watching to see gray whales. He has just now gone off to college, and is my deep hope that by the time he's my age, and hopefully sooner, that he will be talking to his peers or family about the new discoveries, about the new technologies. Maybe he'll even contribute to some of those. He's a computer science major. And the success of many people, many of the people that are here in this room, all of us here working together, to pull these whales back from the brink of extinction. Thank you.